unique story that we just sit here and listen to. Amazing. Now, soon we got to hear Jack. We got to hear the other side, Jack. Now, Jack, the Mayhorns are related to the Hatfields of the famous Hatfield-McCoy funeral. In fact, I think Jack started the feud.
Did you steal that bucket, ATV?
Yeah, I stole the pig.
Oh, the pig. It was a pig.
I heard on
Okay.
the radio, man, that rivalry's going to brew back up again.
Yeah,
About
'cause-
the rights to the movie and the books or whatever.
Hey, wait, I'm a Hatfield. No, I'm only kidding.
What? Now, is Faye's last name Hatfield?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She married a Hatfield.
Faye married a Hatfield. And Jack has a brother. Now, they all know the story, but he has one brother, Roger, lives down in Virginia, who's really investigated a lot of it. He could take you around there and show you points and all the things that happened and trace the family trees. And
Crazy.
all that. It's pretty interesting.
Oh.
But now, you mentioned Hatfield McCoy. Now the kids, they have no idea. Many have no idea, most, what you're talking about. But we grew up, it was just all part of our language, wasn't it? To talk about people not getting along, it was Hatfield McCoy.
Well, I can tell you this about the Hatfield McCoy, like documentaries and all that stuff. Most of it is not true.
Huh. Interesting.
I mean, the one they did with Kevin Costner,
Yeah.
I mean, they made them all out to be a bunch of drunks who did nothing but fight. I mean, these people had to work for a living.
Yeah.
It was just a disgrace. And of course, maybe I'm partial, but I don't.
Yeah. They had to make a
That's
story
TV.
out of it, you know.
That's TV and Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Well, I hope like I said, we're not going to force anybody to tell their story, but thank you for sharing your story. And see who wants to go next week. I think I've read, for some reason, I've read this before, but this has been on my mind all week, is one of these, this is from, in case you have, Love Poems from God, and it's this guy translated poems, says 12 sacred voices from the east and west. So he went back, some of them way, way, way back, but if you've heard of Rumi, but some of the people in here are, some probably, like St. Thomas Aquinas is in here, and St. Francis, and something like that. Those are just a couple I'd heard of, and a lot I hadn't heard of. But this is one by, who wrote this one? So there's 12 poets that he goes back, and one named Kabir, a guy named Kabir, from 1400s. And he says, "Stuck with another day, how should we pass it? If anything worked for you before, I'd give that preference." And for some reason that's been on my mind all week. And you know what that kind of says to me is that that's in a way what we come back and do every Sunday. We say, wait, what really works for my life? Or it's taking time to say, wait, who is the person I really most want to be? You know, what's the life I really want for myself? You know, and it's coming back and remembering that. And sometimes it's like, well, let's give that preference. You know, let's go that direction. And it's funny how simple that is, but how I still need that almost every day. You know, as we go into a situation in our lives and we want to attack it one way that we know is going to be detrimental, but we're just so tempted to attack it that way, stop and think, well, what has worked before? Has that worked? You know, let's give preference to what works. So, let's, let me see. I'm going to do things. Not sure which direction to go here. So, but I love sharing these stories. Anybody have a direction you want to go?
Workshop.
Well, Dave, what worked before?
Yeah, really. Really. Uh-huh. Good one. Good one.
You just said it, man.
That's good. That's pretty good. you know, if we end up getting into Ecclesiastes more when we get through all the stories, I think the stories are just as valuable. And, well, I'll share, well, I did, and I may have told this before, I'm losing track, and I need to write these things down better, but if you're like me, you forget anyway, so. But you mentioned a pig, Jack mentioned a pig, and it reminded me of this story of a Hindu priest and a Jewish rabbi and a televangelist who ended up all traveling together out west. And it was getting late, and they end up, they're like out in Oklahoma somewhere, and so they stop at a farmhouse, and people are friendly out there. Hey, could you put us up for a night? And he goes, well, I've only got 2 spots. Somebody's going to have to sleep in the barn. The Hindu priest says, well, I'm used to humble, circumstances. I'll be glad to sleep in the barn. So they go in. He goes in the barn. A second later, there's a knock at the door. Farmer opens, and it's the Hindu priest, and he says, you have a cow out there. It's just really not right for me to sleep. It's sacred to us, So the Jewish rabbi says, my people traveled and wandered. We're used to all kinds of things. I'll go out there. Second later, there's a knock at the door. He says, there's a pig out there. It's really not right. You can't sleep out there with a pig. And so the televangelist says, I was in the Boy Scouts once, so I can handle this. So he goes out, and a second later, there's a knock at the door. It's the cow and the pig. So, I want to make sure you get that. Some things that have been going on in my mind is, I've got several notes written here. So, thinking about the Love Your Life workshop, and I was having a chance to kind of share with a couple people last night about what we do on Sunday, and that. And it's for me, whenever it seems like I talk to people about the Love Your Life workshop, and kind of coming from my background, it's almost a little hesitant because I think they're going to say, well, that sounds kind of, I don't know.
Like a cult?
Just self-help, yeah, just feel-good self-help. And yet I get this resonance, I get this resonating, like, yeah, I understand, So it's interesting. I don't know if it's kind of our times or our culture or what a lot of us have grown up with. But it does seem to resonate. So I think that's, I feel that, and I sense that with you guys, that we continually come back, and that's like saying, what's worked for you? Give that preference. In other words, what is it's really healing to your soul or gives you feel good about? It's kind of like when you do something and it's a little bit difficult, but you go do the right thing and you feel good about that. It may be difficult, and you're like, well, that's nurturing to our hearts, to our soul, to our bodies sometimes, So to stay with that, that's loving your life. That is loving your life. And so the workshop part of it, to me, comes into sometimes there's an element of our faith, and I'm not negating this, but sometimes there's an element of our faith that I see where it's just waiting for God to do everything. And it's almost a fatalistic view. And I'm not negating God's role in our lives, and I think He has probably much more to do with our lives than we can even grasp hold of, which raises a lot of questions, but I don't have the answers for those. But what I do know is that I have a part. And so it's not all up to me, but there are some things that are up to me. And I think Jesus spoke to that in all of He said, and in the Sermon on the Mount. Here's what you do. Don't let your light be hid. Don't, be careful with your salt. Okay, and here's what you do about anger. Here's what you do about relationships. Here's what you do about your enemies. Here's what you do when you're taken advantage of. And I don't think it was necessarily rules. Okay, here's the rule. But here's a way to approach this that is good for you, is loving to your life, and it's loving to others. And so there is this element of God working and God doing and God supplying. Blessed are those who mourn; they will be comforted. but then he goes kind of into this workshop. Okay, well, here's what you do in this situation. Here's what you do in that situation. So, I was thinking about two things. I'm sitting here trying to decide the direction to go, but maybe they're both applicable. And one is, I've been thinking about this idea of trying, let me stand up so you can see everybody better. Trying something new. And, we all have our own personalities. We have all our ways of doing things. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong at all. However, within that, it's kind of freeing sometimes to say, I could try a new way. I could try something a little bit different. I have my way of approaching problems or approaching situations or approaching people. Maybe I could try a new way. Especially if I look in the old way hasn't really worked or has some real flaws, And I think about, they credit Einstein with saying insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, what about the way that we interact with each other, interact with other people, and there's maybe problems or issues? And morning.
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 When there's problems, and how we go about dealing with things, my own family, not my siblings and all, and are having an issue right now, and I thought about it for several days and talking to different ones, and it has to do with my adopted brother and acting crazy and how they deal with it, and it just suddenly kind of occurred to me, what if we try a different way? Here's the way, as a family, that we've approached problems, generally, by and large, for however old I am, anyway, 50 years, which is kind of ignore it till it goes away. It's kind of, that's overall, right, if you had to draw a picture of it, and we're probably not alone in that, but, I thought, well, what if we tried something different? And that was challenging to me, and that was the challenge. It was for myself, and I shared it with my siblings, and created some interesting conversation. And so I look at and I thought, well, does that hold true with Jesus? And I look at Jesus saying to those people, and when we read the Sermon on the Mount, what if you try a different way? And remember, he would say, well, when you've heard it said before, don't murder. That's the old way. And so you've gone through your life thinking, well I haven't murdered anyone, so I'm all right. And he says, well, I say, don't be angry. When you're angry, that's murder. And it's in a way he's saying, try a new way. Try a new way of thinking, the person I really love and most want to be isn't a person that carries around anger. That, so deal with this murderous, seed in your heart. The same, and rather than Jesus saying, well, here's the rule, and if you're, and laying guilt, I see him just saying, here, try a new way. When somebody takes advantage of you, what's the old way? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Somebody takes advantage of you, you lash back, or you say, they're going to get theirs, or however we deal with it. Or we ignore them until they go away. We hope they go away, He says, well, what if when somebody takes advantage of you, you give them even more than they asked for? And you're at peace because you're at peace with yourself. It's not about you're trying to buy them off or being, but because you're at peace and you're whole and you know that they really can't take anything away from you. What if you go the extra mile? Try a new way. And, when we talked about love, and he said, well, most people love the people who love them. He goes, what? That's okay. He says, but what if you love your enemies? What if you try a new way? And so there's this challenge and to me, I think Jesus is opening up. I can imagine people listening to that and being like, wow, I could live like that? And and so to be connected with God, to be connected with Jesus is in a way every day of opening up, can be, our eyes and our possibilities to a new way. There might be a new way of dealing with this, you know, and it can be just the slightest change could be a new way of, and you know, I could look at a situation and, you know, I've gone through this with one of my sons recently, you know, and he was going through some issues and I was sweating about it and wanting to talk to him. And it suddenly occurred to me that I've added to the issue because I've dealt with it the same way. For 10 years, I've dealt with it pretty much the same way. Said the same words, or avoided, you know, until it gets to a certain point, said the same kind of thing, and goes on and nothing changes. And I wanted to say to him, you know, you got to try something new. And I realized for him to try something new, I had to try something new. I had to say something new. I had to be something new, you know. And how liberating that is. It doesn't necessarily always fix things, but in terms of relationships, in terms of how we go about things, that we get this opportunity to try something new. Now, so in thinking about that, I've been thinking about the idea of peace. Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And that can mean a lot of things. So they'll be called children of God, or be called sons of God. And one way to look at peace is getting people to harmonize, getting people to cooperate, you know, and that can be tricky, you know. I know we have lots of people who've been parents in here, and we have teachers, and getting kids to cooperate and harmonize is tricky business, if not impossible, it seems sometimes. But yet, you know, this idea of being a peacemaker, and so I started thinking about peace and all the different kinds of peace and internal peace. Because I think right before that, Jesus says, "Blessed are the pure in heart." And I think that of being internal peace. Blessed are those who have this internal peace. Because if I have a spirit of peace about me, if I am at peace, then I think it helps to be able to be in a situation with other people and to try to spread that peace. You know, not force it on people, but to spread it when I think about situations. And so I started thinking about how do we live at peace? There's a lot of difficult situations in life. And sometimes you might be in a situation that the situation is creating havoc on your spirit, on your mind, or you know, you're worrying, or you just don't feel like yourself, or you feel trapped, you know, in a situation. And so you don't just fix that by saying, "Okay, I'm going to be at peace here." So it's not always so easy, but so I started thinking about this. What if I decide there is no circumstance that has to take away my peace? Yeah, that's a tough statement to make. There is no circumstance that has to take away my peace. Because generally it's circumstances that take away our peace, even if it's waking up in a certain mood, you know. But as I go through my day, there are all kinds of circumstances and other people that seem to rob me of my peace, being at peace. And so just to think about that question, is it possible to have peace in any circumstance? And so if I were to say, and I can say it because I'm talking, I can say, it is possible. It's possible to have peace in any circumstance. Now think about, so you think maybe you're in a situation right now that is really bothering you, or maybe it's been years, maybe it's just something today or recent. And you think about that situation that gets you tied up in knots, or gets you acting or just gets you worried, or makes you feel threatened, makes you feel trapped, you know. And you think, what if you were able to be at peace in that situation? how would you respond? How would you behave? How would that situation change if suddenly you were just at peace? You know, and visualize that. I think that's in a sense what Jesus does with a lot of the things in the Sermon on the Mount. He gets them to visualize how it would be if you responded differently to this situation. If you were at peace with who you are and your identity, and somebody takes advantage of you, you would be free to go the second mile. You know? And once again, I'm not saying that's easy, that's simple, but to me it's kind of an exciting proposition, especially as we sit here now. It's not always as exciting when we're in the middle of the circumstance. And somebody's challenging us, somebody's questioning us, somebody's irritating us. And they're not always small irritations, sometimes they're big and they're difficult. But what if I could bring peace to that situation? You know? What if suddenly I could be at peace? How would I respond differently? And so I think it's good to kind of imagine that and to visualize it. And also to ask ourselves, do I believe it's possible to have peace in any situation? You know, I love what Paul said. He said, I've learned how to be content in any situation. I think that's kind of the same thing. I learned how to be content when I've got stuff. I learned how to be content when I don't have stuff. You know, I've learned how, you know, so I learned how to be content when the day goes my way. I learned how to be content when the day doesn't go my way. I learned how to be content when it's sunny. I learned how to be content when it's raining. I learned how to be content, you know, when everybody's in agreement with me and smiling and happy. I learned how to be content when the people around me are in terrible moods and blaming me for it. You know. Those are not easy things. I'm not saying they're easy, but it's good to think about. So I think, you know, and also that in Paul's statement is, I think it's in Philippians 4, which has been real important to me, where he says, he talks about the peace that passes understanding. You know, and I think this gets into where we're doing our part and God does his part. And I know that there was a period of time that was a very crucial period of time in my life, about 7 years ago, when I was going through the marriage problems, and I would just, and it would literally affected my body. You know, we've all been there where stress affects our body. I remember going to a pharmacy and waiting for something, they have the things that measure your blood pressure, and I just did it for fun, and my blood pressure was real high. And here I was in the middle of stress, and I went up to the pharmacist, and I said, you know, my blood pressure is really higher than normal. What could cause it? They said, stress? I was like, no kidding. Yeah, that was a brilliant one, you know. But, so it was affecting my body, you know, but I remember at times, just many, many times, and sometimes many throughout a day, saying to God, I need that peace. But I don't know how to produce it, but I need that. And I would become at peace. Like, it's okay. And then there were things that I needed to do, you know, to take care of that, even asking for it. But that verse kind of says to me that looking at life and all the circumstances and things that happen in life, it seems like sometimes peace is impossible. And if I'm not at peace, it's good to be aware of that, because there may be some things, some changes I need to make. You know, some simple things that I need to do that would bring me more at peace. And by at peace, I kind of think of at ease with who I am and who's in control of this life, and even though things in this life seem out of control. At peace with the fact that I live in forgiveness, you know, that God is forgiven us, there's no judgment, no condemnation, and that, as I say almost every week, God loves us and he also likes us. I'm not living moment by moment with God frowning and beating me over the head. You made a mistake, you thought the wrong thing, you know. And yet, at the same time, if I'm not at peace, maybe I need to stop and think, well, wait, I'm kind of doing some things here. I'm going a direction that is not consistent with being the person I most want to be. So let's bring that back into alignment without beating ourselves up too much. Let's just start and be happy with slow changes. When we try to make big changes, sometimes it falls apart. But at the same time, allow for the fact that God acts and God works. It's not just sitting back and laying on my bed and say, I'm not getting out of bed, God, just give me that peace, I'm going to lay here. Sometimes, it's okay to lay in bed sometimes, I'm not saying that. But you know what I'm saying? But I'm saying, I get up and I move forward and I do some things I know I need to do. And at the same time, God supplies this peace. Now, the other thing that Paul says in that little passage, he says, the first thing we do in all circumstances is be grateful. And that's difficult. That can be difficult. And yet, and I include you guys in this, but it seems like as I meet people and meet more and more people, it seems like sometimes the people who have been through the most and have the least are sometimes the most grateful. And all I know is that there is a connection between really being grateful and really being at peace. And so it's interesting that Paul says in all circumstances, just lay it all out before God and you get this peace that passes understanding. He says, but he prefaces that with be grateful, be thankful in all circumstances. And, I think that's a process. I think it's a learning process. At least for me it has been. Some people seem to be more in tune with being grateful, but I feel like I've learned it more as I've gotten older to be grateful. Such an important thing. So it begins with an awareness. It may be being honest with myself. I need to make some changes, but also be aware of God's effort in this to try to be aware that, yes, we can bring peace into any situation. And I think one of the greatest ways to make peace is to be at peace. And then it's just as we go through our day and be aware of those situations that disrupt our peace. And there may be times that we need to get away from a situation. But the greatest peace that we're talking about is to be peaceful in our hearts inside a situation. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes we see the problem. I just need to get away. I just need to go out west somewhere where there's mountains or to the ocean, get away. And sometimes we do. But I think God brings us a peace that we can be peaceful right in the middle of the situation. And I think about Jesus going out early. It's in Mark 1. He said, early in the morning while it was dark, he went out to a lonely place to pray. Think about how peaceful that was. And immediately all the disciples come and get him. They're like, come on, there's people, there's stuff going on, let's go. And I would have been, leave me alone, I need my quiet time. And Jesus just says, well, okay, let's go. We're going to, kind of like, I didn't come here to make a big crowd. Let's go on to the next towns and villages, And he did not come to just separate himself. He had his moment, but he had this tremendous sense of peace, even though they were bringing crowds full of demon-possessed people, crowds full of sick people, crowds full of people wanting to kill him, and he was still at peace. He was a person at peace. So as we think about that throughout the day, sometimes I think, and I tell friends, take a deep yoga breath. In yoga, everything begins with the breathing. And yet, God created our bodies, and he created our bodies to breathe. And there is something about taking a deep breath, just like in singing, right, Sam? We need that deep breath. And it carries oxygen throughout our bodies. And that's a gift from God. That's what he created for. But also, as we take a deep breath and count to 10 or whatever, it's a reminder of the one who breathed into us. In Genesis 1, God breathed life into us.